For months, I kept finding long hairs in my apartment. Then I caught my neighbor leaving my home. For months, I was completely confused by something happening inside my apartment. I'm a guy in my 20s, and I live alone on the very top floor of an apartment building. I've had short hair for over 10 years. The longest hair on my head is maybe an inch long. So tell me why I kept finding long brunette hairs all over my apartment. And when I say all over, I mean everywhere. The bathroom floor, the shower, my kitchen, the living room, on old clothes, in cupboards, even on my couch. These weren't short hairs either. They were 5 or 6 inches long, sometimes even longer. At first, I didn't think much of it. I work with a lot of people. I go to the gym. I take public transportation sometimes. It seemed completely possible that random hairs were getting stuck to my clothes and ending up in my apartment. But the longer it went on, the harder that explanation became to believe. I've been single since November. It definitely wasn't an ex-girlfriend's hair, and the color didn't even match hers anyway. My ex had black hair. These hairs were much lighter. The weirdest thing was where I kept finding them. The shower. That was the one thing I couldn't explain. I use my shower almost every day. Water is hitting every surface constantly. Yet somehow I'd keep finding these long brunette hairs in there. Every time I started getting suspicious, I'd convince myself I was overthinking it. There had to be a normal explanation. There always is, so I ignored it, at least until one morning in April. I'd just finished an early gym session when I got a call telling me I didn't have to come into work that day. Instantly, my mood improved. An unexpected day off. I started walking home happy as can be. Now my building is a little unusual. I live on the 5th floor, which is the highest floor in the building, and there's only one apartment on each floor. Mine is the only apartment on the 5th floor. Instead of taking the elevator, I started climbing the stairs because I was sweaty from the gym anyway. Everything felt completely normal. Until I reached the final flight of stairs. As I turned the corner from the 4th floor to head up to my apartment, I saw someone walking down. My neighbor's daughter. She lives on the 3rd floor with her parents. We locked eyes. Immediately, I was confused. We'd never really spoken before. Not because there was any bad blood between us. We just never had a reason to talk. I'd spoken to her parents a few times in passing, but her, almost never. So seeing her coming down from the 5th floor was strange. Really strange. Remember, there's only one apartment on that floor. Mine. I gave her a confused, hello? At that point, I assumed maybe she'd knocked on my door for something. Maybe she needed help. Maybe she wanted to borrow something. I expected some kind of explanation. Instead, she just quietly said, hey. Then she brushed right past me. And that's when I noticed something. Her hair was wet, not slightly damp, not it rained outside wet, fresh out of the shower wet. The kind of wet hair where you know someone was standing under running water just minutes ago. Then something else hit me. The smell. It smelled exactly like my shampoo. Suddenly, every hair I'd found over the previous few months came rushing back into my head. The color matched, the length matched, and now she was coming down from the floor where my apartment was. I stood there for a few seconds trying to convince myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe she'd gone upstairs to ask for something. Maybe she'd visited someone. Maybe the shampoo thing was a coincidence. But the more I thought about it, the worse it got. If she wasn't inside my apartment, why was she coming from the only floor where my apartment existed? And if she had been inside my apartment, how did she know I was coming home early? My building doesn't have cameras. It's an older building. There wasn't any obvious way for her to know. The entire thing made no sense. I finally walked up to my door, and that's when my stomach dropped. The door opened immediately. I hadn't even unlocked it. Now I know for a fact I always double lock my door before leaving. Always. Not sometimes. Always. I have 2 separate locks. One regular lock, and a second, more secure lock that uses a different key. Yet somehow my apartment door was sitting there unlocked. At this point, I wasn't wondering anymore. I was panicking. I dropped my gym bag, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the bathroom. The shower was wet. Actually wet. Not a little damp. Wet enough that it was obvious somebody had used it recently. And the last time I'd showered was the morning before. That's when I decided I needed answers. So I went back downstairs. Straight to the 3rd floor. Straight to her family's apartment. And I knocked on the door. A few seconds later, she answered. But she kept the chain lock on. I could only see part of her face through the gap. I looked at her and asked directly, "Were you at my apartment?" She immediately looked nervous. I asked again, "Were you inside my apartment?" For a second, she just stared at me. Then she quietly said, "I just had to get something." I remember standing there trying to process what she'd just admitted. Then before I could ask another question, she said, "It won't happen again," and closed the door. Just like that. Door shut. Conversation over. And I was left standing in the hallway realizing that for months, somebody had apparently been entering my apartment whenever I wasn't home, using my shower, eating some of my food, leaving hairs everywhere, and possibly even sleeping in my bed. I changed my locks almost immediately. I installed a motion sensor camera outside my door, and thankfully, since then, I haven't seen any evidence that she's come back. But looking back, I think she'd been entering my apartment since at least January. That's the first time I remember finding the hairs. The strangest part? She never stole anything valuable. My laptop was untouched. My watches were untouched. Nothing expensive ever disappeared. She seemed to only use the shower, eat some food, and spend time inside my apartment, which somehow made the whole thing even creepier.